Hello, friends, both old and new. I am John St. Baptiste, and this is Believe. We are talking about the last episode of Season 1 of American Gods. I'm so excited to talk about this episode. Amy is not here right now. She may be joining us later. Apparently, she got attacked by a bear, or at least the lack of one. If you're a parent, you get exactly what I'm talking about. So right now, we've just got a couple people hanging out. Hopefully we'll see some more, but House Lowerbridge, Braun Holler, thank you both so much for coming. And hopefully we see a few more people here shortly. But I am excited to talk about this episode so much. It is such a separation from what is in the original book, but at the same time, there are so many things and ideas and moments taken from the book that are put into this episode that are really, really like. Also, we've got Peter Griffin. He's lurking. That's what Peter Griffin does best. It's okay, man. Hey, lurk all you want, man. So, this episode, Season 1, Episode 8, final episode, Come to Jesus. This is a good one. It's a really, really good one. So I'm excited to talk about it. We start off with spiders crawling all over the different bolts of cloth, tapestries, things like that. And we see that it comes up to actually a Nazi sitting and sewing. And I love his old sewing machine. I used to know how to sew. It was something I did in my youth, and I know how to do it, but I don't think I could probably do it well now. It's like 25, 30 years later, so my sewing skills probably wouldn't be that good, and I certainly wouldn't be able to make such fine clothes as we get to see Anansi make. And so he's been... Oh wait, Brown Holler, is the plural of Jesus Jesuses or Jesus? I think it would be pronounced Jesuses, but you would spell it in the second form, which is with the apostrophe at the very end. If you can thread a sewing machine, you can sew. The rest is cake. Oh, I don't know about that. I don't know. I forget how to make a pattern. I could probably remember if somebody showed me. You know, it might be like riding a bike or whatever, but yeah, I'm not sure about that. So Anansi has his once upon a time. Best way to start a story, right? It already started out well. I love the way his character is used in the show. I think even more than in the book. I think, having read it again recently, and keeping in mind that this book was written 20 years ago, I think the character seems significantly more dated. I think a few characters seem significantly more dated, and that's not saying a bad or disparaging thing. It's just saying that, well, basically the whole principle of this book and the show, it's time catches up to everybody, even gods. But he's telling the story about Bilquis. And, she was the Queen of Sheba. About how her worship started. We go back to Baran in 464 BC. And the worship for her. And about how kings always wanted to take that power. It's a very interesting anthropological study, because there has been this concept that has not necessarily been debunked, but has been slightly turned on its side, not on its head, that most societies started with a matriarchal agrarian society and were eventually taken over by a patriarchal society, because in an agrarian society, once there was the concept that the harvest was always going to come, whether or not you worshipped or prayed or respected female divinity, it was still going to happen. One of the earliest examples of this is the Romans with Kronos. And at the same time, there is an innate understanding. I think 90% of people who read about society starting matriarchally say, oh, hey, that makes sense. And I tend to agree with it, but I think that a lot of the anthropological philosophy that was come up with in the first half of the 20th century may have biased things in a certain manner, and it may not have been as common as it's made it out to be. And that's not, at the same moment, that's not saying that it's a complete fabrication, because there are obviously examples of that. Two of your consistent ideas that you see in mythologies and legendariums across the world is the fertility goddess who can give and take away, and the god who gives his life for the new generation. It's something you see across the board. If you can get past the underlying racism, great book that you should read is The Golden Bough by Sir James Frazer. Great book, and just get past the innate racism. Pretty much everyone was that way at the turn of the century, and that's not justifying it, but you have to take things in the context in which they were written. But it's a concept that you see over and over again. That being said, let's get back to Bilquis, and these kings come to worship her and try and usurp her power, and because of her power, they didn't last very long. I love the way Nancy tells the story. He tells it a F a lot better than I can. Probably not too difficult. But then we have the I'm sorry, this is what I wrote down on my notes, and it probably sounds horrid, but we have the vagina vacuum cleaner. And yeah, that's the way this worship was performed. By the way, we had a few more people pop in. We have Bobby Junk Wax, aka Bobby Catalano, and we also have Revengeance. It's because Yancey is all fancy. Okay, I'm sorry, you'll have to explain that to me. I'm not quite sure what you mean. But we got, oh, and Nancy is all fancy. Yes, Nancy is all fancy. He's, oh God, Orlando can pull off some clothes that I could never wear. Like, as much as I love formal wear, I could never pull off half of the stuff that yeah. Purple check jacket, nah, it's not going to work for me. Yeah, everything he says is all poetic. You're right, but it's a storyteller manner. It's like a Homeric poetic, as opposed to say like a Tennyson style poetic or a Poe style poetic. It's it's much more. It's like a storyteller would tell a story. Like when you're, I mean, you think about how all of our great stories started. You have people sitting around a campfire, most likely a campfire because, well, it keeps you warm and dry, and telling stories. And some people were better than others. You know, yeah, but it's a great start for the episode. And then we go to, what happens over time. And then we're in Tehran in 1979, which I don't know if everybody here is old enough to remember. I'm hardly old enough to remember it. I mean, I was 3 years old. But this was when there was the uprising in Iran, and it went from being a somewhat secular country to being the Khomeini's uh, theocratic state. And it almost happened overnight. This was the year that the American hostage crisis happened, um, which was, as I said, 1979. But also, things happened throughout the city. It wasn't just the U.S. Embassy that was taken as uh, it wasn't just the members of the U.S. Embassy who were taken as hostages. It was also, I mean, things happened all over the place. And there was a concerted effort to de-westernize anything that was going on in Iran at the time. Oh, by the way, hi, Siren Quicksand. Good to see you. Always good to see you pop in. As I was telling you guys earlier, Amy may be coming in later. It depends on how this bear attack goes. She's wrestling with the bear right now. It's amazing. She rides in rickshaws. She wrestles with bears. Amy's just awesome. Yeah, she's just a badass. But, as Anansi points out when he's talking about that whole moment in actual world history, anger gets shit done. That's the anger gets shit done. Not necessarily done well, but it gets shit done. Yeah, Bobby, Amy is amazing. I mean, she wrestles bears in the back of a rickshaw. It's insane. She's I don't even know how she does it. So we see Bilquis, she gets herself out of Iran before all the shit goes down. And like I said, I think about half our viewing audience is probably too young to even remember any of this. And as I said, I hardly do, but it did happen. A really scary time. And they forced the queen into the back seat is exactly the way Nancy puts it, which I think is really poetic on a number of levels. But she's going to keep on keeping on. She's Bilquis. She's going to do her thing. And, she still needs her worship in that manner. Happens to do with the, what is colloquially referred to as the Mile High Club. And as Anansi points out, says to herself, I still know what I am. Which I think is the definition of what this entire episode is about. Now, in the telling of the story, we cut away to a hospital room. And someone is dying of HIV. And it's really cool what they do. I don't know if anybody else caught it. If you did, awesome. The digital clock says 1988, which 19, I mean, I can see it. Like, I generally tend to use 24-hour time as opposed to 12-hour time when that's just the way I think. But 1988 obviously wouldn't happen. That'd be 28 after 8 as opposed to something. So, but it's a little clue as to when this is happening. That's when the AIDS epidemic was really bad. HIV was, a serious concern for so many people at the time. And, oh, hey, Mackenzie Burns is here. Hi, Mackenzie. I'm actually going to be on Mackenzie's channel later tonight. We're talking about Game of Thrones and theories that we had that did not pan out. So, if you want to check that out, please do. I hope to see you there. And, yeah, we'll be discussing some really cool stuff. So her friend, the young lady who we saw her pick up earlier, she's watching die in the hospital. I don't know if anybody else here has personally gone through watching the slow death of someone they love. Yeah, Brown Hollow, that's what I was saying. It was her lover that she picked up while she was in Tehran, in Iran. I don't know if anybody else watched somebody they care about go through a slow death. There was a writer, I can't remember his name. Can't remember who it was. And I hope nobody takes this. Death should have a decent period of time, like 2 weeks. Like an immediate death shocks the hell out of you. But watching a slow, painful, like watching somebody you really care about over 2 or 3 years just decay, it is just as bad, if not worse. And so, at least for me personally, it really brought some stuff home for me to watch that whole scene. But yeah, I mean, it was, and don't get me wrong, HIV and AIDS are still around, but before there was more of a grasp on how to take care of it, a lot of people didn't need to died, and I'm just gonna leave it at that. But after she watches her friend die, my assumption is, she sank what money she had into helping her friend survive, and that didn't pan out. But we see her later, about, probably 10, 12 years later, and she's homeless, and the way it's portrayed is just the angle at which these scenes are shot, I think, is so definitive of how people in that situation feel. Because if you notice something I picked up on my most recent viewing of this, everything's shot from ground level, so it really does make you feel like you're kind of in that person's shoes. And then Tech Boy comes up, and this is when she's standing outside of an Ethiopian restaurant, watching the television that's on, like, by the bar or whatever, which, I imagine that's cuisine that she probably likes, because that's part of the world she's originally from. She's watching the destruction of her temples in Yemen. And the actress who plays her, I can't for the life of me remember her name, really gives off that, like, remorse. Like, you feel for her, you feel with her, you feel so sad and lonely because of what's going on here. And then Tech Boy comes up, and he has a solution to her problem. He offers her a phone, he offers her Instagram, and what's that dating site? I'm sorry, I don't know the names of these things. I don't date, so I it's kind of lost on me. But he offers her this, and she wants that power back. She wants that energy back. She wants to not be in the position she's in. So she takes him up. Worship is a volume business. And that's what all that sliding your screen to the right. Oh, Brawlhalla, I didn't catch that. Okay, the first dating app he hooks her up with is called Sheba. Nice. Very nice and subtle. And so then we flash back to Nancy telling a story. Well, Shadow and Wednesday are sitting in their skivvies, waiting for clothes to get sewn for them by a spider, which is awesome reference. It was one of those things that were not in the book, and it was just so well done, the references that are used there. But he says, "Did you get the moral?" And Shadow has this idea. He's like, "Oh yeah, you don't compromise." And Nancy's like, "Where'd you pick this idiot up at?" No, the moral is get yourself a queen. It missing the forest for the trees. Shadow's pretty good at that sometimes, but he does prove smart in later moments. And when they're talking about this is the first time that we see Shadow yell at Wednesday. He's like, "Hey, dude, you screwed me over." And he really calls him out on his stuff. Wednesday's like, hey, you're not upset with me. You're confused. You're not upset. You're not pissed off at me. You don't understand what pissed off means. You're not pissed off at me. You're confused, and you're getting irritated about that, but you're not pissed off at me, which figures in at the very end of this episode. We'll get to shortly. And then Shadow nods off, and he has his dream. Once again, we have the Mountain of Skulls and the Bone Orchard. This harkens back to the first episode of the series. It also, in the book, harkens back to one of the first portrayals that we have of what's going on in Shadow's mind, which is when he has that dream while he's on the aeroplane. And then he wakes up, and he's in the car. Wednesday's driving. You know, for all the driving Wednesday said that Shadow was going to be doing, Wednesday does a lot of driving himself, which I can understand. I like to drive a lot. And then he says, we're visiting somebody, because Shadow asks, are we in Wisconsin? He's like, no, we're in Kentucky. Which, by the way, is just south of where I live. And if anyone who doesn't live here in the States, in this part of the States, ever gets the opportunity, it is one of the most beautiful parts of the entire world. Honestly, when we see Easter's house later, there are parts of Kentucky that look like that, like those gardens, that grass. It's nuts. It really is impressive. One of the prettiest drives I've ever been on in a car is anytime I've driven to Nashville, because going from Cincinnati to Nashville, you get straight through central Kentucky, and most of it's just like these rolling hills with grass and flowers. It's absolutely beautiful. And then a few times on a bike, I've gone through eastern Kentucky, through the Cumberland Gap into like Virginia and the Carolinas, and you see the gradual buildup of the Appalachian Mountains. It's absolutely gorgeous part of the country. Like, it really does look like what you're seeing in the show. In case you've never been there, just want you to know, like, I don't think they did any CGI there. Like, that's actually what it looks like. It's just beautiful. But so they're heading to her house, and Shadow asks if, because Wednesday says be very careful around this woman, and Shadow asks, oh, is this somebody who you've been involved with before? And Wednesday says, not for all the cheap plastic toys in China. Now that, I think, is a... Sorry, I was having a bit of a tech issue there. But I think that's really indicative of a number of things. For one thing, apparently there's something precious about all the cheap plastic toys in China. Also, that there's a reason Wednesday wouldn't get involved with this woman. Maybe we'll find it out. So then we get to see some rabbit murder. I don't know if that scene disturbed anybody else, but it really kind of bothered me. Not because I have a problem with, like, dead rabbits. I mean, if you're going to eat food, I personally feel that River Maynard Keenan was right. Life feeds on life feeds on life. So I'm not a vegetarian. I eat meat, and I do eat rabbit. Rabbit's actually pretty freaking delicious, but the straight up rabbit murder with the car was a little disturbing. And a word that's used quite often in this episode. Yeah, Braun Holler, I didn't get why he ran over the rabbits either. I think it's just because killing things is like what he does. That was my only idea there. I was a wee bit confused by it myself, but I think that's where he was going with it. I'm not sure. So they get to the party, and once again, Shadow asks who Wednesday is, and Wednesday says, "If I told you the truth, you wouldn't believe it." Which I think is great. Also, he talks about what Easter's become, which is, a pale reflection of what it had been. And then we see Jesus. We see a number of Jesuses. And one actually walks up to Shadow and says, "Hello, Shadow." And it's really interesting which Jesus representation this is, because my assumption from the appearance is that it's a late Romanesque, early Byzantine representation of Christ, which with the halo and everything like that, which I have a lot of that artwork in my house. I collect Byzantine artwork. It's the thing. But but then we see that there are other Jesus. There's like an Asian Jesus. There's Black Jesus. There's Eastern Orthodox martyr suffering Jesus. And we really realize that Easter is a holiday that's been used by a number of different cultures for a number of different reasons, but also that people have their own interpretations of what a specific deity means. Another thing we'll get into towards the end of this episode, we see a Virgin Mary with baby Christ. And then Jesus Christ says to Shadow, "Hello, Shadow." And Shadow's like, I don't believe what I'm seeing. And Jesus answers, "Believing is seeing," which I think is really interesting. It's going to come up a lot more later in this series. Following that, we meet Easter. And oh my gosh, casting here is absolutely amazing. I'm really hoping we get to see something of her in season 3. So well done. Absolutely well done. Like, I that whole motif is just carried off so well. But she notices that Shadow's a blusher when he meets her. Wednesday has warned him to be careful. And, she's a goddess of fertility, so Guess what the majority of people think of when they come across her? Yeah. So Odin is, trying to sell her on this whole old gods, new gods war that he is getting going for some reason. And she's like, I'm doing just fine. And Odin delivers an amazing monologue here, which I wish I had written down, but I did not. But basically, it's about how people may practice that day now, but you ask 99 out of 100 people, they don't even know that the celebration is for Astora the Dawn, or Ishtar, or people don't even know that. They don't know why they eat eggs and bunnies on our holy day. They aren't familiar with this. And Odin says, well, it was great until those guys came along and got themselves crucified and crucified the holiday. He always is abrasive, and it's one of the things that I think is great about the way his character's portrayed on the show, because we are talking about a war god and a god of death. So yeah, I would imagine that he'd be a pretty abrasive person. Plus, if you read any traditional Norse mythology, Odin was pretty abrasive. He wasn't the nicest guy in the world. But he says, Happy fucking Easter! Right in front of all the Jesuses. And Easter herself gets pretty offended by that. And then we see Odin, or Wednesday, sorry, spoiler. At the end of this episode, you're going to know what his real name is. We see Wednesday start doing what he does best, which is getting people to do what he wants. And I think Easter's the first person who he tells that Vulcan was killed by the new gods. And he says, show them who we are, and they will worship you. Because all this worship's been lost. I mean, Easter's doing well because people celebrate her holiday, but it's NutraSweet, it's cancer sugar. It's it's almost like when people put in fact, I think this might even be a Neil Gaiman metaphor, so I don't take credit for it. But when people put saccharin, fake sugar, in hummingbird feeders because they're worried about the poor birds getting fat, well, the birds don't get all the calories they need, so guess what happens to them? They die. Kind of the same thing. So we pop back, and we're in the museum, and Bilquis is looking at the ancient carving that she finds from her temple. One of the few things that survived after the temple in Yemen was destroyed. And Tech Boy shows up. And, of course, he says things in one way and means another. And it's funny because usually sexual innuendo sounds like one thing, but it means something sexual. Whereas he's saying some pretty sexual things, but he's actually talking about something that has nothing to do with sex. And that's, hey, I scratched your back, you scratch mine now. And she's like, oh, I can give you what you want. He's like, the last thing I want is the vagina nebula. Which I've watched this episode probably a dozen times, and I still laugh every time I hear that freaking phrase. just because it's pretty freaking hilarious. But basically, he points out, hey, you owe me, and I'm calling it in. You got what you wanted, now I'm here to ask you to pay the piper. So we find out a bit later what exactly that is that she's supposed to be doing. But then we go back to the house in Kentucky, and Laura is pulling up in her ice cream truck with Matt Sweeney riding shotgun. I love that she still has the ice cream truck and it's still playing the god awful music. I hate ice cream truck music. It just drives me out. I don't know why. It's something about the range that it's played in, or I have no idea what it is. But it drives me freaking crazy. But yeah, Sweeney asked her, "Oh, how do you know he's here?" And she's like, "Or how did you know where this was?" And she's like, "Because I see him." And we see through Laura's eyes that she still sees Shadow's light. Speaking of Shadow, we flash back to Shadow, and Jesus is sitting in the lotus position in a swimming pool, on a swimming pool. And Shadow walks in the room, and he's a little bemused by this, and it's like, "Are you really Jesus?" He's, "Yeah, you know." And once again, it's reiterated, I am belief. Like, if you believe, then you'll see. Where Shadow keeps saying that he doesn't believe in anything. I think that's kind of proven to not be true. We flash back to Wednesday and watch him make the con. And then we even get to see Easter swear, which is great. Because she's just like, holy shit. And that's because she realizes that there's a dead person in her house. That dead person happens to be Laura. And then we see this god awful scene that I could not handle. I knew it's going to happen. I still turn my head away every single freaking time when she spits up maggots because she's dead. She's a corpse. I get it, but oh my gosh, it's so rough. Yeah, can't do it. And I'm sorry that for such a great episode of this show that I'm making it kind of boring, but I do want to go through it. Amy wasn't able to make it tonight because of her bear fight. It's awful. Should have seen the other guy, the other bear. But so then she meets Easter, and for one thing, Easter tells Sweeney that she doesn't like him. She thinks he's a very unpleasant man. I believe was the way she put it. And then she asks Laura, she's like, "How do you feel? Describe your death to me." And uh, you know, Laura asks about resurrection, and she's like, "Yeah, it's my special day. I can't resurrect people, but I can give life." But then she realizes that a god killed Laura. And she can't do anything about that. She can't stop the work of another god. And so then, Easter leaves again after saying, "Oh shit," because she realizes that the new gods have shown up. Well, at least media has. And then we realize, like, media and Easter have made this deal. That's why Easter is remembered, is because she's Easter is popular. People don't remember why. Sorry, my glasses fell off. People don't remember why they do these things, but they still do. Like a lot of ritual. Ron Holler points out that Easter saw Sweeney and Laura's last screenshot, I'm sure. Oh, yeah, I bet she did. I think he was standing right next to her, if I remember correctly, out on the balcony. But, we see media, and Gillian Anderson is just freaking brilliant here. I understand because of the issues with screenwriters and things like that she decided to leave the show. And I think the young woman who plays New Media is a brilliant actress, and I think the way that they brought New Media across is just absolutely genius. But we're talking Gillian Anderson here. I mean, she's unbelievable. So we cut back to Laura and Sweeney, and Laura's literally got Sweeney by the balls. In fact, she talks about popping them out of his testicles. It'd be like shucking peas, which I thought was terribly funny. And so he finally confesses that he was hired to kill Laura. And she's like, "Who hired you?" And he won't tell her. And she says, I know who it was. Just say his name. And finally he admits it was Wednesday. And then she's like, "Has he been involved with this for the entire thing? Like, my perfect plan to rob the casino didn't go right? Was that because of him?" He's like, "Your plan wasn't perfect. You didn't account for divine intervention," which I thought was a hilarious line. And she's like, "Why are they fucking with us?" And he's like, "What do you think gods do?" Which actually, like, seriously, if you have ever read the Iliad, the Odyssey, most things that are the basis of all of our early mythologies, that's what gods do. They fuck with people. With the Greeks, it was a lot more predominant because, like, the Greeks, their gods were pretty much just normal people with a lot more powers. So we go back to the conversation between Media and Easter, and Media takes the kid gloves off, and she's like, "Hey, without us, you wouldn't have anything right now." And says that it's what's going on, and has been going on for a long time, is religious Darwinism. Wednesday comes out and faces off against Media and gives an amazing monologue. I will try and find it, and I'll post it in the comment section down below. I think there's a website where you can actually pull up the script for the episode. Amy usually uses that whenever she's on here, and so I will definitely do that. And then we have Mr. Town again. Once again, Crispin Glover, such a freaking amazing actor, and I love how he plays Mr. World. It's so great. I've gone into this a million times, so I'm not going to go into it more. But yeah, we see the children again, which is always really, really freaking disturbing. But now Mr. World starts giving the same type of diatribes that we've heard from Tech Boy and media. And you kind of wonder about that. That kind of sat disturbingly to me because he's never spoken that way. But now he's saying that the old gods are passenger pigeons, and we don't have to fight. We'll just let you die off. Well, then why don't you? Why do you feel the need to respond in this war? And then Wednesday says, I dedicate this death to a star of the dawn. And boom, all the children die. And they're laying there. And finally, we see Tech Boy and media a little bit scared, which is nice. And that's when Shadow says he has faith. And Wednesday says, do you have faith, Shadow? And Shadow says yes. And asks who Wednesday really is. And Wednesday tells him, I am All-Father. I am Grimnir. I am the Hanged God. I am Votan. He goes through the whole litany of everything. And then he turns to Star and says, show them your power. And she literally takes the spring away. A recurring motif that you see in a lot of different mythologies is a goddess of fertility who, for some period of time, takes away the ability for plants, animals, people, so forth, to be able to reproduce. And so she does. She just takes it all away. She takes away the spring. And media says, what have you done? And Wednesday says, tell them we took the spring. We'll give it back when they pray. Which is just so freaking awesome. And then he asks Shadow, he's like, do you believe? Shadow says, everything. And then, when we think the episode's over, Laura comes out on the balcony. And she says, I'd like to talk to my husband. Then we see the episode when it's over, or we think it is, but it shows Bilquis riding to the house on the rock where we know all the old gods are going to meet on a bus. And pulls her same trick from the airplane when she did the Mile High Club thing. So that's interesting. And then we see it pulling into the house on the rock. And one of the things that I thought was really cool is the three other vehicles we see are a horse and buggy, a Jeep, and a vintage Jaguar. I would really be interested to find out who were driving those three vehicles. But I think it's a great way to end the episode and a great way to end the season. And if you want, here on this channel, you can find all our discussions about Season 2. Once again, this is a pretty short episode, but that's just because my co-host wasn't able to make it. So I apologize for that. If you want to watch some really cool conversations later tonight at 8:30 Eastern on Mackenzie Burns' channel, I'll be talking with her and a few other people, as I was saying, about things that we did not see pan out in American Gods, or things that we did not see pan out in Game of Thrones. Next week, I will be hopefully having Amy back on. And since a lot of things came up, I would like to discuss with her and with all of you things that may have been missed, thoughts, ideas about Season 1. And then after that, we're going straight to Norse mythology by Neil Gaiman. So I hope to see you next Wednesday. Thank you, everybody who came out today. Ron Holler, thanks for wielding your wrench spanner, even though you may not have need to. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to talking about Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology. But next week, what I will be doing is discussing just the series in general with Amy and anybody else who is in the chat, or maybe even anybody who wants to pop on. If you would be interested in being part of the discussion, drop me a private message. You can do so here or on Facebook if you follow me there, or if you're a friend there, or on Twitter. You know, I've got all that newfangled new God stuff going on because they make my sunglasses. So, thank you everyone for coming out. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Once again, sorry it was so short and there wasn't a huge amount of discussion, but I do love all of the comments that people have brought up and thoughts and ideas. So I really hope to see you here next Wednesday. I'm in the middle of moving right now. That's why not so much music content has come up, but there will be more soon and shortly. I apologize for that. I'm just like in two houses right now, and things can get a little chaotic. So outside of these live things, it's kind of hard to do. By the way, these bookshelves are all going to be empty next time I see you all, unless it's tonight. But otherwise, yeah, all my books will be packed up and shipped to another part of town. So anyway, thank you everybody for coming out. I hope to see you again soon. And in the meantime, please believe.